Let's start with political parties in France. We've learned that Russia is not interested in what's going on. They were declaring that they're not interested in what's going on in the United States. But the situation in France is much more important for them right now. And we know that the right-wing party has won the first round of elections in France. What does it mean for Russia? What does it mean for the conflict in Ukraine?
It's a good question. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions outside of, I mean, even in France, actually. The the problem is, so this kind of election, as you know, it's a snap legislative election. And for that election, this is the rule is as follows: each citizen votes for the party he likes, and then we take only the first ones. I mean, the first two parties are the ones which go in the second round, and then let's say the ruling party, if you want, will be then decided. So we don't know at this stage exactly. We know that there are three major parties that emerge. The first one is the Rassemblement National, or the National Rally, which is a right-wing party traditionally created by Jean-Marie Le Pen, who used to be a resistant in World War II and happened to be an officer in the French parachutistes. And he was at that time very right-wing, extremely right-wing. I mean, he used to fight in Algiers, and this is old, the old guard of these right-wing people, and very nationalist, of course, probably a little bit more patriotic than nationalist at this stage. Anyway, this party was taken over by his daughter. That was about 20 years ago. And her daughter even ousted her father out of the party, although he was the founder. And the idea was to make this party more acceptable, if you want. It was clear that this party had always had quite a received the interest of the French population, but nobody dared to bring them to the power because they liked him, they liked the nationalist approach and all that, but still they didn't want to have them in power, especially because Jean-Marie Le Pen, so the founder, was considered as anti-Semitic, which is, in my view, debatable, but we will not debate that at this stage. In any case, his daughter decided to make this party more acceptable, and in particular, to fight against anti-Semitism within the party, to make it as a normal party. As a result, the Rassemblement National is still considered as a right-wing party, although to my opinion, it is more a party of disgruntled people than a party of right-wing as such. Because especially at the end of the Cold War, as the communist parties disappeared probably almost everywhere in Europe, the communist parties disappeared, and these communist individuals found their way into the Rassemblement National because it was the opposition party par excellence. So that was the true opposition, if you want. And therefore, you find within the party, even today, you have extremely right-wing individuals, meaning right-wing in the sense ultra-nationalist. So probably it should be defined as nationalists, because my personal understanding of right wing, of left wing, is the role of the state in the society. The more the left you are, the more state you have, and the more right you have, the less state you have in the society. That's a little bit the difference you may have in the US between Republican and Democrat, roughly speaking. I mean, I'm talking just about domestic policy. In terms of foreign policy, it's almost the same. But the idea, I mean, left wing would be to have less state, and left wing would be to have a lot of state in the. I mean, the role of the state is important in the society. Right wing much less. But if we look at the national rally of Mrs. Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, we'll see that, in fact, she's not advocating less role for the state. As a result, she had within her members, she had people from hardcore communists, ranging from hardcore communists to hardcore nationalists. And in my view, it's not a real right-wing party. You may not have in the national rally people as you have, for instance, in the Republican Party in the U.S., for instance. It's very different. So yes, it's the party that, in my view, today is still considered as the opposition party, the real opposition party, but it's not as right-wing as you might expect. And even though in the campaign that we had in the last 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of people said it was dictatorship, and the dictatorship would come with this party. I don't think so. It's strongly nationalist, as I said, but they are still, I think, the basic tenets of the party are still very democratic. The second party, and this party won roughly 34-35% of the votes, as it was said yesterday night. I'm not sure exactly of the figure, but in any case, the roughly total is important. I mean, we don't go into the behind the comma. The second party that came out of this election is the new Front Populaire, the new Popular Front. Popular Front is a party that has been created just a few weeks ago. In fact, just for this election, because in reality, it's not a party, it's a coalition of parties. It's a coalition of left-wing parties. And because they realize that they are so diverse that they may not reach any interesting score if they competed individually. So they gathered, created this new Popular Front, and Popular Front is, in the French history, is important because it refers to the Popular Front that existed in the mid-30s. That was, in fact, as you had in all these, in all the European countries in the 30s, it was the French version of a populist party, but left-wing instead of a populist right-wing, as you had, for instance, in Italy with fascism and all that. But it was very much this kind of left-wing populist party. In any case, that's the name they have. This party is, or this coalition of party, I should say, is headed by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is a hardcore leftist. Hardcore leftist. Again, this is the traditional left in France. So very much in favor of the workers. This is a constant struggle against capitalism, industry, and this kind of thing. And so it's very much the old guard leftist or left wing, that is with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's not totally stupid, by the way. This is a guy who, for instance, in the last couple of years, he tried to keep some kind of independent view about Russia, for instance, and especially Palestine. And in the campaign that we had in the last 2 or 3 weeks, this coalition was coined as anti-Semitic because it was in favor of Palestinians. So, but in France, the political struggle comes extremely thematic and cartoonish to some extent. But we have to recognize that in the since last October, the Jean-Luc Mélenchon was one of the French politicians who kept his line in favor of the Palestine people. And in my view, this is commendable in my personal view, even if I don't share his political view in terms of economics. But anyway, so this is very much the left-wing party, and they got something like 30 or 32% of the vote for this election, or 30%, I think. And then you have the third party is the party of the president, which is called Ensemble at this stage. It changes at every at every election. It changes its name. This is a very strange thing. It started by En Marche, and now it's Ensemble. We don't know exactly. This is a party which is very much, to some extent, it reflects a little bit the way politics is waged in today. It's more marketing than content. This is, and that's very much Macron. He has absolutely no content. This is just how to advertise itself. It's all about PR and not about content. And they can say everything on one day, and the next day it's another thing. And within the party, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So this is very sad. And that's the reason why probably they got the third place, because they got 22% or between 20 and 22% of the vote, which is for the president, the party of the president, which is quite low. And we have also to admit that a lot of individuals that used to be in the political, in the party of the president, a lot of people left this party to create their own party just before the election. So it's basically what we had so far as a majority, I mean, the official majority, even if it never got the majority in the parliament, but I said majority because it's a presidential party. But in fact, this presidential party is extremely split. It had no, and that was also the idea of Macron, because when he came to the power in 2017, he pledged to abandon the old guard politicians. And you had in France, you had old politicians, and they kept staying in these political parties for decades. And in fact, you had no real change. Regardless of the name of the party, it was always the same people. So when Macron came, he had an idea that was probably not so stupid in itself, but that was poorly implemented. The idea of bringing new people from the civil society into the political life. And his party was, in fact, a lot of amateurs, and we can say it that way. The result is, the problem is that when you work with amateurs, you have an amateurish policy and political life. And that's exactly what happened. And the problem, this is the other side of the coin. his party, in fact, never could manage the complexity of the situation we had, not only in foreign policy, by the way, but also in domestic policy. A lot of issues like the pensions and things like that, they were poorly managed by this party, and therefore you had obviously nobody wants to hear about the president anymore. It's probably the most despised president, probably even in Europe today. Nobody trusts him in France, and that was reflected in the in this vote, because in fact, if you sum up, I talked just about the three main winners, if you want, of these elections, and you have a lot of smaller parties. But if you sum up, you would say that about 2/3 of the French do not trust their president anymore, which is quite enormous. Now, that said, that means that what we will have, because there will be a second round on the 7th of July, that means next week, and then there will be a decision who will be the leading party, whether it's the National Rally of Marine Le Pen, right wing, or the Jean-Luc Mélenchon, with his New Popular Front. We don't know exactly, because we don't know, because the unknown factor is for whom will the voters of the presidential party vote for, and that's why it's we could say there's a probability it could be the Front National, so the Rassemblement National, so the right wing, but it's not as straightforward as it appears, because again, we don't know exactly how other voters will behave, and since we had a very good participation to the election, meaning that there is no reserve, there is no because very often you have, if you have a big part of the population that doesn't, or voters that doesn't vote, then that means for the second round you may have some surprises. But here, there might be some surprises, but probably there will be no more voters for the second round. As a result, we'll probably have a struggle between the Rassemblement National and the New Popular Front. Now, how this could affect the foreign policy? I mean, there will be, in my view, if the National Rally comes to the power, it will not change much. Because although we say it's a right wing, in fact, this party managed to, in order to be acceptable, they tried to accommodate their views on the foreign policy, or to align their views on the presidential party. And because the idea is that they want to gather the votes of the presidential party in the second round. As a result, they don't have a significant different view as the presidential party. They may have probably more consistency as the presidential party, but there will not be radical changes. And Marine Le Pen has made an even Jordan Bardella, who is the second in command of the party, if you want, and might become the first prime minister if this party wins the second round of the election. They have said many times that they don't want to support Russia. So they said very clearly, Ukraine is our ally and not Russia. So that's more or less the idea. So if they come to the power and if they win the second round, there will probably not be any change on that. And the same for Palestine, for instance, because as I told you before, the National Rally was so much considered as anti-Semitic before that Marine Le Pen tried to make exactly the opposite in order to avoid this tag as anti-Semitic. As a result, and And we have also to see that in France, because, I mean, remember that France is the biggest Muslim country in Europe, in fact, although it's a Christian tradition, of course, but France has the biggest Muslim population in Europe. And the consequence of that is that you have a very strong Islamophobia in France. And a lot of these of people who would like to fight against immigration, who would like to send the Arabs back into Africa or whatever, you have these guys in the Rassemblement National, in the National Rally, meaning that, in my view, and just considering the two main topics that we have discussed on your channel regarding Palestine on one hand and Ukraine on the other hand, I don't think that if the National Rally comes to the power, it will be any change, any significant change. If the other party, the New Popular Front, comes to the to power, then the things might be very different. Then you may have a strong impact on the foreign policy, especially when it comes to Palestine. Probably less so when talking about Ukraine, because this party has always had mixed views on the Ukrainian, I mean, had mixed view on Russia, basically. They consider still, they don't have the same hate against Russia as the presidential party, but they still consider that it's not worth being an ally of Russia. However, they might be in favor of a settlement of the conflict, and they might favor of not just a policy in favor of Russia, but a policy in favor of peace, if I can put it that way. But I'm not sure that they have a lot of sympathy for Russia in general. But they may say, no, it's not worth feeding the fight and the war in Ukraine. And for that reason, I think this party would be probably more oriented towards peace. As to the conflict in Palestine, then it's absolutely clear this party considers that the Israeli government is a government of, and you have all these tags that the apartheid and dictatorship and blah blah blah, and therefore they will definitely promote a solution in favor of the Palestinians. Remember that, as I said before, a large part of the French population is Muslim, and of course the leftist party is very much in favor of helping this part of the population, which is by definition probably not the poorest, but let's say the part of the population that is probably the least favored, and therefore it's probably why the New Popular Front feel that it's its role to help this part of the population. Remember that you have a lot of this Muslim population which lives in suburbs and even slums in some parts of the country. So there is a lot of things that needs to be done objectively, that needs to be done just to avoid the criminality, low criminality, but even big criminality, but especially low criminality, which is definitely a matter of the immigrated population, and therefore probably you having more initiative on the social side might help to have also to address the security issue through the society and social policy rather than repression and police and this kind of thing. So that's probably the difference. In terms of domestic policy, I think that there might be some differences, but both parties have been very unclear about what they want to achieve in terms of domestic policy. The reason is that France, as of today, is in such a position in economical terms that the freedom of movement is extremely narrow. And it's clear that you cannot make big promises in this area because, again, the debt has skyrocketed in the last years under Macron. And definitely, if you take measures that will affect also domestic policy, I mean, the benefits you would give to individuals and all that. So as a result, they remained during the whole campaign, both parties remained extremely vague as what they would do if they come to power. And probably, as I said, the reason is that, in fact, there is very little room for new initiatives in that. They will have to cope with the situation as it is. So that's more or less the situation. But again, I don't know which party will win, and again, it's not 100% sure that the National Rally will win the second round, although they are in a better position to do that. But again, nothing is said at this stage, so we don't know. But the important thing is that definitely we see that the former majority, the presidential party, Ensemble, which means together in French. This party is done basically, and this is almost also the party. This is the same kind of center-left parties that you have in many countries, including, for instance, Germany. You had with Rishi Sunak as well, although it was probably a little bit more right-wing, but it's a center-right, center-left parties. You don't know even where they sit exactly because their policies changed very quickly. But we see here clearly, as we have seen in other countries, a clear protest. It's a protest vote against Macron. Whether Macron will take the consequence and leave, because what will happen if whatever the result of the next round will be, he will have to rule with a party, a majority of the parliament, which is obviously not his party. And this situation has not been very often in France. It has occurred in the 80s, in the mid-80s, with François Mitterrand and Jacques Chirac, who used to be, so François Mitterrand was a socialist, and he lost his majority for the same reason as we have seen today with Macron. He lost his majority, and in 1986, if I'm not wrong, the right-wing party won the election, the legislative election, and Jacques Chirac became the prime minister. So you had a right-wing prime minister and a left-wing president. In theory, that couldn't be a problem in the sense that the president is basically in charge of foreign policy and defense traditionally. Although the constitution is not so precise, traditionally in France, the president does the main orientation of the foreign policy and the defense policy, while the rest domestic policy and the rest of the managerial aspects of the country is done by the prime minister. So, in theory, that could work to have a president and prime minister from two different parties, but it may not work with presidents like Emmanuel Macron, who wants to be involved in everything. He is the guy who wants to decide for everything. He's everywhere and wants to. It's a kind of macro manager to some extent, and he was also criticized for this. And that's probably one of the reasons why people don't like him, because it's a micromanager. But when you have a micromanager, then that may have as a consequence that you may have a clash between the prime minister, if it's a right wing or even a left wing, because then if Jean-Luc Mélenchon, for instance, would be the prime minister, then he's very much left wing, and there would be a confrontation, open confrontation with the president. If the prime minister is right wing or coming from the National Rally, that might also have some clashes, but probably a little bit less, because, as I told you, the National Rally has aligned a lot of his positions with the positions of the presidential party. Now, the question that arises with if the National Rally wins the second round is whether Jordan Bardella, who is the leader of the party, and Marine Le Pen wants to keep the possibility of being president. So she probably will not want to be prime minister, because if you are prime minister, you run the risk of being discredited by what you do. Prime ministers are not very popular in France in general, because, as I said, they do the daily management of the country. As a result, usually they have to deal with the real problem of the population. And therefore, when you are prime minister, that means that it's not automatic. You may have examples like Jacques Chirac, for instance. He was prime minister, but he became president later. But most others that tried, they never managed to do the both functions. As a result, Jordan Bardella might be the prime minister. But Jordan Bardella is a guy who is 28 years old. So he has absolutely no experience whatsoever. I'm not sure he ended even his school. He didn't graduate, I think. I'm not sure about this, but he has absolutely no degree, university degree or whatever, because even when he was at school, he left to do politics, and he worked within the party, the National Rally. So he has an experience of the party, of the apparatus of the party, but he has no practical experience of life. He has never worked in a factory or in an office or things like that. So had no practical experience. And if you see a young guy of 28 years old ruling a country without having any experience, a previous experience, professional experience before, it's the open door for problems afterwards. I mean, and they might be even, we will see, probably not this week, but after the 7th of July, after the second round, we may have, depending what the National Rally decides. But if the National Rally decides, you may already have demonstration and protest because of that, because the population will probably not accept that, probably. So and that's the reason why Jordan Bardella said he would be the prime minister only if his party has the absolute majority in the parliament. So far, his party has only relative majority, and it's the biggest party of the parliament. But in order to make decisions and to have the necessary votes for decision, he needs to have allies within the parliament, and that makes the thing a little bit more complicated. So Bardella has already said that he will accept the position as prime minister only if he has a majority, an absolute majority in the parliament, which is not given. As a result, there's still a lot of open questions regarding the situation. We don't know, and again, even if the National Rally has got the most of the votes at this stage, it doesn't mean it will be the winner at the end of the race. That's the first point. And secondly, if it becomes the winner, it doesn't mean that this party will be able to rule the country as it wants, because it may not have the absolute majority. And if it has the absolute majority, he may have a prime minister who may not be accepted by the population and the political class at large. So there are a lot of unknowns in this election, but it's for sure it's a big change. It's a brutal change also for the government, because they never, I think, Emmanuel Macron, as he decided to make the snap election 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think he expected to have kind of a confirmation of his power. He was certain that the population loved him, and therefore, after the European election that showed already the importance of the National Rally, he wanted a confirmation of the fact that the population loved him, and that's the reason why he wanted this snap election. He lost. He's lost his bet, by the way. For him, it's a shock, and that's the reason why some say that he might he might quit, although but you know, he changed his mind like he changed shoes, so he may well change his mind again. So that's the situation. But it shows that, as we have, I mean, some have discussed that at the end of the European election that we had 2 weeks ago, it shows the fact that the current leadership in Europe is not up to the task that is expected, given the situation. I mean, we see that in all the countries that had a radical view against the Russians, for instance, in fact, the majority collapsed. And you saw that in Germany, you saw that in the UK, you saw that in France and Italy. It's different because they had already this need of majority 1 year or 1.5 years ago. But so we see that there is an inadequation between the leadership and the expectations of the population. And we will see that we will have the same problem in the US, by the way. We have exactly the same problem. And at the end, the presidential election in the US will have very similar features as the one in France. It's a choice between I don't know the name of this disease, but it's a choice between two diseases, basically. none is perfect, and you have a choice between two solutions that are basically not suited to the problem. So this is what we can say at this stage. There will be a lot of discussion in the coming weeks in France to know which party will give its vote to the two winners, or the two main winners of the race, and that will create this kind of unknown dimension, I would say, of the result. So everything is open, basically.
Yeah.
So that's what I can say.